over to Joe to introduce his topic, and if you could all just please give him a warm welcome.
Hello. So as Roy said, I'm Joe Stead, and I've been coming here for 2.5 years, 3 years, I think. First time speaking at Agile Yorkshire, first time speaking at any Agile event. I normally do much more technical talks, so this is an interesting one for me. But kind of when I was asked to speak about it, I kind of thought, well, what could I talk about? And I've got a lot of experience with Greenfield and legacy projects, and that's actually thanks to Gwen that I'm doing this talk, so thanks, Gwen. So I thought, talk about that, and the difference between them, and how you avoid going from this lovely photo on the left, which I took, by the way, it's in Pennsylvania, to the picture on the right, which I didn't take because I'd probably be dead. And yeah, and comparing that to Greenfield and legacy. So the first thing I wanted to do was kind of think, how could I describe legacy and Greenfield projects in a non-technical way? And I kind of opened this up to a few friends, and one of my friends is a car enthusiast. He likes his classical cars, and he owns a Reliant Scimitar. This is a 1972, I think, or at least he owns one, I don't know if that is one, Reliant Scimitar. And he said this is kind of a good example of a legacy project. It's roadworthy, you can have your seatbelts, it's got seatbelts, gets you to A to B, nice and safe, and it will do the job. You can drive around in it and it's fine. That's a legacy project. The issue is, if you crash in a Reliant Scimitar, the fiberglass body will crumple, the engine will not drop out and go underneath you, it will go into you, and you will probably die. If it catches on fire, which as we all know cars catch on fire all the time, the fiberglass body will incinerate you and you will probably die. That's a legacy project. So it will work. I mean, we love the automotive industry at the minute, right? It's all we talk about is how they build cars to how we build software. Well, let's talk about how we run cars to how we run software. When it goes wrong, it's going to hurt if it's old. I guess that's a fair comparison. Not? And then this is a Nissan Qashqai, which is, as of about 4 or 5 days ago, the most popular car in the UK. Does anybody in here own a Qashqai, out of curiosity? My research is terrible. So, a Nissan Qashqai could be considered a Greenfield project. It's got a lot of traits as any other new car. It has built-in sat-nav, DAB radio, ABS, has a metal frame, so if you crash, you're just going to get a dent and have to replace a few bodies, a few panels. There's no body replacement here. If you crash at speed and you have to, the engine comes into you, it's going to drop out and go under you instead of crush you and kind of seriously maim or kill you. It's a much safer car, but all kind of modern cars are sort of the same. They just look a bit different. And all old cars will kill you if you crash them, is what I'm trying to get at here. But again, I kind of think that's not a fair comparison between legacy and Greenfield, because all software projects, if they were written 15 years ago, if they're written yesterday, are actually this. So it's kind of, we're defining a car and that's what we end up with. And it doesn't really make any sense. That isn't going to drive, you don't see that car on the road. Has anybody ever seen that car recreated? No, because it's not a thing. And that's kind of what software is. It's all unique and you bolt things on and you end up with something that nobody really wanted, but it's kind of a car. And I imagine if you crashed that, you'd die. And on that, I'm actually done with car references because I know absolutely nothing about cars. But I thought that was kind of a good opening of how we can compare legacy and Greenfield with cars, which apparently the software industry loves at the minute. So what I wanted to talk about, I guess, was some common traits of legacy projects and some common traits of Greenfield projects. So we'll start with legacy. And stock images in software, I say this in pretty much every talk I use stock images in. Really hard to find good ones. So for legacy, I went for a key. Take from that what you will. So a common trait for me in legacy projects, certainly ones I've worked in, is lost information. Why was that decision made to start with? The reasons for those decisions get lost over time. They get lost by the wayside. People leave, and suddenly it makes no sense of why this worked in the first place. What you can always do is remember that at the time that that decision was made, it was made with the best intentions, with the information that person had at the time. So it may be the worst piece of code you've ever seen, but it was done with good intentions. And that's kind of a real big thing with the legacy, I think, is just information gets lost over time because it's not documented and things change and it just kind of works, which is fine until you get to change it. And that's this bit, I guess. So over time, a decision was made 10 years ago, and it was absolutely the right thing to do at the time. But the world has changed, the law has changed, et cetera, et cetera. We need to revert that decision, and all of a sudden that decision is baked into the software, and it's the core part of it. And it kind of doesn't make any sense to take that without rewriting the whole thing. So if you want to do this huge U-turn, you're kind of stuck because it's ingrained into how the software works. And although it's not true for all software projects, sometimes you can just take something out and change how it makes a decision. It's true for a lot of them because over time, the reason that decision was made is lost. It's lost information, I guess, in legacy projects. There's not really much more I can say about that other than things change over time. So the real thing I guess I want to talk about is something called the Dungeon Master. Now, this is a really, really common trait in legacy projects. And it was actually coined by somebody called Alberto Brandolini. He was the guy who came up with the concept of event storming. Anybody's heard of that? Cool? Nope? Excellent. He's a really clever guy. You should go read his books and stuff. It's good. So the Dungeon Master is essentially the original author of a legacy project. He's been around since day one, and it's now 10, 15 years later, and he's still there. One thing to consider is, with any kind of dungeon, I guess, there are traps laid all over the place. Now, they're not necessarily intentional traps. They're decisions that were made at the time with the best of their knowledge that have kind of got out of control, and all of a sudden, the only person who knows how this software works is the Dungeon Master. And of course, any Dungeon Master is accompanied by his minions. So a Dungeon Master has been there since day one. Minions come and go, and they're people who just trust what the Dungeon Master says without challenging it, and will carry on building on top of the tire fire, for lack of a better word. Now, this Dungeon Master, they've got a great knowledge of the system. Any issues with the system, you go to them because they're going to be able to fix it, because they know exactly what's wrong. Okay, they're a key integral part of this team, really, really valuable. So you may think, okay, well, we want to make a lot of changes to this software now. We need to talk to the Dungeon Master, but we don't want to get stuck in the same loop of adding on top more traps to what we've already got. So maybe we could make them a product owner or a domain expert, and they can advise us. And that is the worst thing you could do. For the simple reason, this person has a vested interest. Any change they're going to take personally is kind of torture to them. A SQL trigger, maybe we could use that to a message bus. Why? They're going to take that personally. Why am I attacking your ideas? You've been doing this for 10, 15 years. I've been doing it for 3 months. Who am I to say that you're wrong all of a sudden? And that's not because they are right. It's because it is a very personal thing, and they're vested in that software. It's their baby, if you like. And that's kind of a really, really integral part. A really, really big problem in legacy software, I guess, is this concept of the Dungeon Master. And you need to find a way of identifying who that person is, and it's normally quite easy to figure out, because if there's something wrong, that's the person you ask. You found your Dungeon Master straight away if it's one person. And how do you move them on to not be this silo of knowledge, the person who knows and controls everything? And there's a few things you can do. You can go your separate ways. So hire a hitman, or maybe they find another job. Don't hire hitman. You go your separate ways. You can maybe move them into a more of an advisory role. The issue with that, of course, is they're advising you how to do things, and they're going to put their own biases and their own experiences onto things they've already done, either kind of consciously or subconsciously doing this. So they may do it consciously as kind of a way to save time, and unconsciously as a way to kind of defend their previous ideas. Because of course, anything that you do that's better is going to look bad on them, because they've been the one keeping this business up and running on their shoulders for so many years. They're so dependable and so reliable. You've come along and said, actually, we don't really need all of your ideas. So this person is really, really important. It's really, really important to manage this person and make sure they don't tank your project. And if you are suddenly wanting to invest a lot in this legacy project, you need to get them away from decision-making and writing the code and influencing people. Because even if they say, no, look, I know it's bad, I want to make it better, yada, 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 the fact is they've got their own kind of subconscious biases that can prevent them from doing that effectively. I don't know how to deal with that. other than going separate ways. I think it's probably the easiest one, but you do lose a lot of domain knowledge and domain expertise there that is expensive to replace. So there isn't really a silver bullet to dealing with a dungeon master. It's that you need to identify and be kind of cautious, I guess, that this person has a vested interest in making sure any changes could potentially go wrong. It makes them more valuable, and it's making them feel better. It's a kind of a esteem thing, I guess. So that's kind of a dungeon master. They control everything. They know where the traps are, and they can guide you around it. But subconsciously, they probably won't, because why would they? They don't want to look bad. And then if we compare that to some common traits of a Greenfield project, now this Greenfield here is actually in Yorkshire, and there is a grey cloud over it. So Greenfield projects are great. Everything's perfect in Greenfield projects, right? Does anybody actually think that, by the way? Oh, I really want somebody to put their hand up so I could say no to them. Okay. So Greenfield projects, you always got a clear vision. You know exactly what you're going to do, right? You've got maybe a legacy project, or you've got a new idea for a project and we're going to do it. It's based loosely on something else, but we're being original. Except there's no such thing as an original idea anymore. Hey. I did this just for Gwen, by the way. There's no idea as an original thing anymore. Everything's kind of been done before, or it's been done similar before. Everybody's using microservices, things like that. And we're trying to do something new without stealing other ideas. And you don't really know what you're building at this point, because you don't want to steal your competitor's product, but your competitor's product's better. So maybe you should try and steal some good bits out of it, or whatever. So there's no such thing as an original idea at this point. And for really innovative fields there obviously are, but for the most part, it's been done before. And that's going to influence how you kind of design this project. From a business point of view of what you want, you're going to say, well, this person's doing this, and that's going to sell loads, let's do it. And from a developer point of view as well, you're going to see how somebody's solved that problem similarly before and try and do it yourself. You also get your stakeholders fighting, because there's no way that we can't do this idea now because of legacy reasons. We've got a clean slate, and this stakeholder wants this feature, and another stakeholder wants this feature, and we're trying to prioritize it, and actually, you kind of get stuck in the middle saying, oh, I don't actually know what the business wants because nobody's giving me a straight answer. I guess that's where the product owner comes into it, but the product owner is still going to have to deal with this struggle of what's right and what's wrong. And you do get stuck, I guess, of what are we actually trying to build? And what that leads to is a lot of questions from everybody involved, and you end up building the wrong thing again, and you have to backtrack and say, oh no, we've done it wrong, and do it again, which is easier to do in a Greenfield project, so you can move much quicker, generally speaking, but it's still something that happens quite a lot. So is there a clear vision for a Greenfield project? In my experience, rarely. In some, that's not the case. In some, there is a very clearly defined goal when you do it, and you realize actually there's not any value over a legacy project in that one. But sometimes there is a clear vision. Most of the time, I don't think there is. So sometimes there's a new team as well. And now it could be a new team assembled purely from new hires. It could be a new team assembled from different teams already existing in the company. So they've got the company culture ingrained into them already. A couple of them have worked together on different teams. There's some bonds and things like that. But every new team on every project will start out like this. And it's a pile of cogs, and they're trying to work together. But actually, that is a really low-res image. It is just a pile of cogs. What you want them to end up looking like is this. So you want them to work together, you want them to gel together and be a brilliant machine that's delivering the best they can, as quick as they can. To get to this, that's going to take time. So to go from, I hate Keynote for this. To go from this to this, it's not an instant thing. It doesn't matter if the team's built from existing people already in the company or externally, that's going to take time. So there's always going to be kind of a ramping up period here. And that's something a lot of people kind of forget, I think. Oh, we've got a new team, we're doing a Greenfield project, let's deliver it next week. No, these people need to figure out how they work, how they think together, and how they come up with solutions and build the best thing that that team can build, not as individuals. With new teams, it's quite important not to get this wrong, because if you do, you end up with something like this, and actually nothing works anymore, and the Greenfield project is just kind of, well, rolling around rusty and it's quickly become a legacy project that never shipped. So with teamwork, it's important to actually put a focus on that and make sure that any new team is given time to actually grow into the role and grow into working with each other, even if they're from the same company, because you are thinking about different problems all of a sudden. There are different things to face. Leads me to optimism and excitement. With any Greenfield project, there's optimism and excitement. Okay, I'm kind of taking this from like a rewrite point of view, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. It could be for any Greenfield project, I guess. So somebody from the business comes along and said, oh my God, this is amazing. We can do everything now. There's nothing holding us back. There's no old code that's bad, and you say, I can't deliver this feature because this reason, this. There's no excuses. Let's do everything. And then the developers are like, oh my God, yes, a Greenfield project. I can use this thing I was reading about last week. Let's do it. Or your tester's like, oh, I've learned about a new automation tool. I'm going to do it right now on this project because what could go wrong? And the answer is everything. Don't do that. So this is where I kind of get really annoyed. Do simple things that work. From a business point of view, do the simplest thing to get that project out of the door. From a developer point of view, do the same. Or don't write clever code as a developer. Just don't do it. Okay? Got to get a Twitter plug in there somewhere, haven't I? Please just do the simplest thing that works on legacy and Greenfield projects, because if you do clever code on a Greenfield project, within a week, I guarantee you, you'll face all of the same problems you would on a 15-year-old project as a developer. Okay? So business people, be realistic and kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, let's do simple things that work and build on top of that and improve it. Developers, don't be idiots, basically. Just do the simple thing, please. And with this kind of optimism and excitement, you're doing the simple thing, the developers are being simple, the business are being reasonable, you kind of have a new problem. And that is expectation management. Now, I'd mention this pretty much every time I speak to somebody about projects, and projects who are slipping their deadlines and their expectations, the business are getting annoyed. It's expectation management. And expectation management is actually a really, really difficult subject, or a really, really difficult thing, I think, especially with a Greenfield project. With legacy projects, the expectation management's a little bit easier because most of the time the business is aware that that project is old and quite slow to work on, and there are a load of hurdles to jump over. Whereas Greenfield, there shouldn't be any, right? So everything should be wonderful. So you need to make sure that expectations are managed across the board. What does the business expect, and what the developer's expecting to do? If you get that wrong, and these kind of lines don't converge into one place, you're going to be in a difficult situation because everybody's left disappointed. The developers aren't building what they thought they were building. The business aren't getting what they thought they were getting. What's the point of this? Does this story ring true with anybody in the room, by the way? Well, yeah, I'm modeling after a company we worked at, Gwen, so I'm glad it rings true with you. So expectation management, to me, personally, is the most important thing for a Greenfield project. Make sure everybody involved knows what they're getting and roughly when they're going to get it. So I did a really, really quick overview of some traits of legacy and Greenfield. So is one better than the other? Is the fiery pit of doom of legacy better than the green mountainside thing that I took? And to be honest, I'd say actually more of the fiery pit of doom. But I would actually say, forget Greenfield, forget legacy. It doesn't actually matter. Okay, if we go back to the car analogy that I kind of really scraped from the barrel at the start, we're going back there. Every project has goals, and every project has a way of meeting those goals. And it may be you kind of wind around some obstacles, so a road like this here, to get there, and that may be a legacy project, or it may be a straight line, that's a Greenfield project. The fact is, you're still moving to trying to achieve something. It doesn't matter if one's really, really complicated to work in, one's really, really simple to work in. The destination is the same. You're trying to build software that works for the business. Okay? If it's legacy, it might take you a little bit longer because there's more hurdles to jump over. That's okay, as long as that expectation is managed, I guess. So I think it's fair to say they're different, legacy projects and Greenfield projects. They're very, very different, but treat them equally. So I decided to do a chart thing because Agile, we like charts and stuff, right? So on kind of the vertical axis, we've got points, number of deliverables, whatever you want to measure this in for this analogy. And at the bottom, we've got sprints because, again, yay, agile. So if we consider a Greenfield project, your kind of chart may look like this. And for argument's sake, let's say this is number of deliverables because it's easier to compare. Okay? And over time, you hit a bump in the road and it kind of goes up and then eventually it'll peter out. And then a legacy project, it's actually just going to be you're delivering next to nothing. But that's kind of not really a fair comparison because obviously you shouldn't compare different teams' velocity and things like that anyway because your story point, yada, yada, yada. But the fact is, you can't compare the output of a legacy project to a Greenfield project because it's like comparing apples and oranges. The whole talk's been, no, it's not really. So they are different beasts, but they're still both fruit, I guess, is the analogy I'm trying to get at here. You are trying to deliver software, but you can't measure the growth of an apple compared to the growth of an orange because they grow differently, I guess. That's what I'm trying to get at. But you should still measure that. Okay, you can still measure your velocity on a legacy project just because you've got loads of hurdles to jump through. You're going to have to do things a little bit slower. That's okay. You can still measure that. You should take that into account, that you're not going to do things at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I think the reason that things are a little bit slower with legacy projects over Greenfield is tech debt. How many of you are developers out of curiosity? Okay, a lot, actually. Okay, cool. So you're all aware that tech debt is kind of an issue, right? Tech debt is an issue in Greenfield projects and legacy projects. That's just the nature of software. Tech debt is okay. It doesn't matter if you've got some. What isn't okay is having too much, which is what tends to be the case with legacy projects. The tech debt's kind of overwhelming, you can't get anything done. So there's this kind of a concept of a debt baseline where actually it's okay to have a bit because you're able to deliver things quicker. So it's okay to have some tech debt. There's the debt ceiling where actually you're completely crippled and your assets are being seized. I don't know why I went so far with the debt analogy there. So there's kind of a ceiling where it's got too much and you actually need to really start focusing on this and paying some of that debt off. Okay, so with a legacy project, you need to pay off more debt than you would a Greenfield project, hopefully, because otherwise you're just going to constantly be grinding and never actually improving. With a Greenfield project, you aren't going to accrue tech debt because you've got deliverables to meet and you've got bills to pay, and so does the business. But make sure you do pay that off as you go along. Don't let it grow to a point that's unmanageable. And then you won't actually ever have this legacy project because it's still just a Greenfield project that's in production running, at which point I guess it's legacy, but it's not this traditional, oh my God, everything's on fire legacy model that people expect. So manage your tech debt. Make sure that the business knows that tech debt is a thing that developers need to keep on top of, and developers keep on top of it, but not too much. If all you do is fix tech debt, you're not delivering anything. So what we want is a good team who can work together and are aware that they're trying to deliver something of value to the business without just paying off tech debt all the time. So the team is really important in any project. Not the code, not the age of the project. The team is really, really important. To make that team even better, we need a good environment, and that will put a smile on their face. Did anybody else think that's really creepy, by the way? Because when I made that slide, I was like, that's really weird. Yeah. So yeah, we want to have a good environment, put smiles on our team's face, and it will just be much better and more autonomous that way. If the development team's happy, they'll continue to work and improve. If the development team's unhappy for the environment, for the team they're working in, or whatever, I just realized I should make them be sad at this point, but I've not. Then they'll be sad and nothing will actually get done. Oh, I'm really annoyed I didn't do that animation. So to make sure the environment is good and the team is good, I guess we can go back to one of the core Agile principles. Woo, Agile Yorkshire, Agile. And to me, that's kind of continuous improvement. So we want to identify points that we can improve, so that may be your retros. And you want to do that in a legacy project and a Greenfield project, because you can always improve how you're running this project. You can always say, actually, we need to pay off more tech debt because we can do this quicker if we just do this one thing in a legacy project, or whatever. We want to plan about how we're going to do this. Then we're going to do it, and then we're going to see if it works. That is as complex as Agile needs to be as far as I'm concerned. For any project, just make sure you're improving. If it's a legacy project, make sure you're not just adding to the pile of tech debt and you're adding to what is essentially a tire fire at this point. don't do that. For a Greenfield project, make sure you're not building a tire fire, okay? Just look back every now and then and improve. It doesn't matter how you're doing it. That is important on any project. And also, be realistic with what you're trying to build as well. So in my experience, trying to do a complete new rewrite of a legacy project is a stupid idea and you shouldn't do it. Now, that's not to say that there aren't cases where that's actually a valid option and that's your last thing. I don't want to speak for everybody in the room. But most of the time, you don't actually need to do it. You just need to manage how you're going to pay off your tech debt on this legacy project and how you can make the team work with it and improve it over time. Okay, you've got this big ball of mud or whatever you want to call it. How can we fix that over time? That's a much better thing of saying, okay, we're going to rewrite it and everything's going to be wonderful. Because all you're going to do is mismanage expectations. The business are going to get annoyed. You're going to spend a lot of time. You're potentially going to lose a lot of domain knowledge because one of your dungeon keepers leaves, for example. You're going to spend money, I think I said, waste time, and nothing's going to be delivered. Or it's going to get delivered late, and it's going to be underwhelming, and it's going to be missing features. Be realistic with what you're trying to achieve. So don't always discard legacy because, oh, legacy, I don't want to work with old code. Because actually, it's still the same thing. You're still going to be delivering value to a business. Software is software, as far as I'm concerned. Some code is terrible, especially if I've written it. And some code is great. That's not exclusive to Greenfield or legacy projects. It's the important thing is how that project is run. And legacy and Greenfield, in that sense, doesn't really matter. Just run the project well, run the team well, make sure the team has got what they want. And yeah, I've flown through my slides, which I expected I would. But I do want to do a quick plug as well whilst I'm up here. So I did this last month as well, but I thought I'm going to have to do it again. So last month, I launched a new user group in Hull. Is anybody from East Yorkshire in the room? A couple of hands, awesome. There is a user group in Hull now called Hull Devs. Hey! Our website's hulldevs.net, Twitter at Hull Devs. We meet every last Wednesday of the month. Yes, I set it up, I know this. We meet every last Wednesday of the month. We talk about everything and anything. Last month, we did automating your home with a Raspberry Pi. This month, we're doing some architecture thing. We've got monitoring in the future, agile in the future, testing in the future, literally anything. If you're in or around Hull or it's commutable, you should come along. It's awesome. And yeah, I'll be there every month too. And with that, that's kind of pretty much all I want to say. So thanks.